afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Wowhead Weekly. This week we've had a live Q&A just this morning, which we're going to talk about, as well as another giant beta build for Perk to deal with. As ever, I am joined by my co-host and Wowhead site manager, Perculia. How are you doing this week, Perk?
I am pretty super. I have a new Murloc in the background
Yes!
and Whimsifier shirt. I'm very pastel and happy.
They look awesome. I love the shirt so much. That's really, really cute. It's lovely. And your Murloc is like a little, you've got a little kick line of Murlocs now. Like
Yeah, they all have their little arms interlinked.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Those are it's all from the Blizzard gear store, right? Because I know a bunch of people, when you tweeted about it, were asking where it came from.
Yeah, it's a recent sale on the shirt, and the Murloc is a recent addition. I was buying some other prizes for Wowhead, and I was like, oh, hey, let's check plushies. And there was this extra plush, so of course I'm going to get it. I think it's the 2010 Murloc from BlizzCon.
Yeah, that's right, the BlizzCon reward one. Yeah, they look really cool. I love them. You've got a little pastel collection of Murlocs. I need to get some shells or something behind me to put these cute things on. So I've got this little Zergling dude. Little purple Zergling with the pocket in his mouth, but
yeah, I got my little green one over there.
Yeah, you got your Baneling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, they're pretty cool, but it's hard to display them when you've just got a solid screen as a backdrop.
Yeah, that is sad.
Anyhow, moving into some news, I guess we should talk about some news, although talking about swag is really fun.
Yeah. There was swag on the live Q&A.
Exactly, there was swag. There was Murloc cups. They were really, really cool, and they're going to be coming to the Blizzard gear store soon, we hear, so that's something to keep an eye out for, definitely. So speaking of the live Q&A, it happened this morning. I think it's fair to say that it was mostly focused on the garrisons. There was a heck of a lot of garrison information in there.
Yeah.
I think it was more sort of aimed at people who maybe hadn't been keeping up with the news very aggressively. Like, I don't think there was a lot of stuff in there that you and I didn't know about already, or people who read Wowhead a lot wouldn't have known about already.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, keep in mind that even though we're covering garrisons every week, that we haven't really seen very many blue posts on them, except for a blog done a few months ago, as well as, a smattering of posts this week. So, to someone that maybe has taken time off from WoW, this might be their first experience hearing about the garrisons again, even though, they're talking about this perk or this building. I'm like, oh, yeah, that, in fact, they already changed that 2 builds ago, and we know all the items and what they do.
Exactly. So I think it's definitely fair to say it was aimed at people who weren't really, really sort of super keeping up with things. So not a ton of new news, but on the same basis as people might not have read every single, I mean, we put out a lot of content on Wowhead. I don't blame you for not reading every single word of every single article and every single guide every single time we publish it. So it's no surprise that some of the things that came up in there were being treated as new information, even though they weren't necessarily. So picking out some of the interesting stuff in there, obviously the full transcript is linked in the article on Wowhead, which has this video in it. So if you want to read that the live blog that I did, it's not a transcript.
Summary, yeah.
I'm definitely not fast enough at typing to transcribe an interview real time. But there's all of it says, so the whole content of the interview in a sort of summarized form is there on Wowhead if you want to read it. But we're just going to pick out some of the fun stuff to talk about today. So the first thing that I thought was kind of cool to hear about was building perks. Now, Perk has been talking about the perks. This is really confusing. We have this problem all the time. So Perk has been talking about the perks you get from garrison buildings in a ton of guides. So there's a bunch of guides on almost all of this information on Wowhead. Again, I'm going to do my best to link you guys to all of them in the Wowhead post. But they were talking about some of the fun, little optional extras that you can get from these garrison buildings. So they mentioned the Gnomish Gearworks, which offers gadgets and also a limited duration vehicle. And the Trading Post, which offers an auctioneer in your garrison, which obviously people can get to from your group as well. And the Barracks, which offers a bodyguard. Now, Perk, I know that you've definitely investigated the Barracks and the bodyguard, because you posted about it before.
Yeah.
So run us through the bodyguard.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, what does it do?
So basically, there are these followers, and certain followers have what's called the bodyguard trait. And then if they have that, that means you can assign it to your barracks, and then they follow you out into the world, and as you kill things, you gain friendship with them. And as they level up, you unlock more powerful abilities. So when they hit their max level, one of them can get, a mailbox anywhere in the world, another one lets you summon players anywhere in the world. They do really useful things for you. So that's definitely a perk of wanting to have the barracks. And there's even more perks that they didn't mention, such as you can also show when you have a max level garrison barracks, you can change what the guards look like for your
Oh,
faction.
cool.
And they believe in the interview they even mentioned that they wanted to add something for Knights of the Ebon Blade as well.
Yeah, they
So that's
did.
another cool perk you can get from your barracks.
Oh, that's definitely cool. And it's sort of they were talking about the Knights of the Even Blade thing. You have to have exalted reputation with them, which is impossible, I think, if you're not a Death Knight.
No,
But
yeah, you
but
you
you
can,
can
I
get
think. You
it.
just have to do your dailies in Ice Crown.
Oh, that's right. It's Ice Crown Dailies as well. I'm getting mixed up with something else. I think of Acarus the Ebon Hold. There we go. That's my
Yeah.
confusion.
That's the area.
But yeah, so it actually makes all your guards into Death Knights, which is pretty cool. So they've got the glowing eyes and they're carrying around the little banners and things. That sounds really fun. So okay, talking about perks, you obviously know them inside out. Which do you think are your favorite? What is Perculia the Rogue gonna have in her garrison? Because I know you're gonna level her first. What's she gonna have in her garrison when she hits level 100?
So I think the stables are really cool because they have both practical and also vanity item benefits. It's really cool because you can stay mounted as you're looting objects. So if you're mining or gathering flowers or picking, even going into your own garrison and, looting objects, you stay mounted, which is super nice.
Yeah.
But the really cool thing is that, as I covered in a guide a few weeks ago, there are these mounts that you get from taming various beasts in the world and fighting with them and raising their confidence. And you can tame these 6 beasts and then complete these achievements at your stables that unlock 2 more mounts. And they look super cool, and I think that would be really awesome to have. Another building that would be cool, which I think a guide's coming out on Sunday on this, is the fishing shack, because when you reach level 3, you can recruit Nat Pagal as a follower.
That's
And
cool.
then he lets you fish a really cool, unique type of fish called a lunker, and turning them in gives you currency, and that currency is used to buy more things like pets and a new color water strider and fishing poles and all sorts of cool things. And he also shows up as you're fishing and will give you encouraging tips like, oh, beer makes fishing better, and then he'll just say, hey, I need a drink, be right back. So that
sounds
seems really
cool.
cool, just as, a total fun vanity
Yeah,
side.
definitely. I think it's like definitely for me, I'm definitely going to be going for the stables. Like the ability to stay mounted while out in the world and while interacting with objects is just so incredibly useful to me. Like I've absolutely loved having that ability in the world, and I will really, really miss it. And it's almost like I don't know how it's going to interact when flying is inevitably brought in, because I'm still definitely of the opinion that it will be, whether you'll actually be able to stay mounted on a flying mount. But for characters, like I've got a miner and a herbalist, and so I'm just really excited about that ability. I'm definitely going to be doing the stables for everyone. And for me, the sparring arena just sounds so cool.
Oh yeah, all those PvP titles you
Oh,
found.
man.
Lady of War, that sounds
Yeah,
cool.
I want to be a Lady of War. That sounds awesome. Like we actually talked about that last week. So the sparring arena for me is something which actually sounds really fun. And like if I'm going to get involved in the garrison heavily, that's definitely going to be something that I want to be doing. And I really like that they were talking about this in the Q&A. That obviously you can, while your building choices are fairly limited in the garrison, you don't have a ton of plots, you can't build every building, but they're not account wide. And I know that obviously anyone who watches this show regularly probably knows that already, but people who are new to the show or new to learning about this stuff in Warlords may not. So they're not account wide, but things like the level 3 blueprints are, which is really nice to hear because you won't have to go and grind those out over and over again.
Yeah, and a lot of things like the mounts I talked about, they'll be account wide. Or
Yeah.
like the armory that is cool transmog gear, all that's BOA.
Exactly.
So, some throwaway alt can do that and then send the cool gear to your main
Yeah.
if you don't have double dip like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
Some of the stuff is BOA at least.
Definitely, and they were actually saying in the Q&A as well that they were going to have the sort of keep an eye on things, and if there's stuff that players felt should be BOA because it's just too repetitive or it's just too tiresome to do it over and over again, then they are going to make that stuff BOA so you don't have to worry about it. But I do think it's good to remember that obviously people who have alts can have everything in their garrison. Like you don't have to have just one garrison for just one character. So if you want to go really heavily down the, oh, I'm just going to have fun line of stuff and just build a sparring arena and do the fishing building and just max those out and have a silly fun garrison, then you totally can. And that's really cool to me. And I definitely think, like, I have a Gnomish Gearworks in one of my garrisons on the beta, and I love the gadgets. I
Yeah, they're so
absolutely
much
love
fun.
them.
They touched on that briefly at the nuke that you can use like once a day and it just destroys everything in a certain area.
Yeah.
That sounds really awesome.
Yeah,
There's
for
also
sure.
been things like you can ride a prototype chopper motorcycle and you can eject it and then sort of explode into the air, and that looks really cool. You can have like a rocket pack on your back and jump really far every 10 seconds. So yeah,
it's a
that's
really fun
definitely
one.
a lot of fun.
Definitely, yeah. That would be a good one for just the fun garrison. And of course, remember, guys, that there is always the garrison calculator on Wowhead. So if you're like, if you know, we're getting closer now. I'm sort of definitely starting to think about what I want to have in my first garrison. So if you guys are thinking of doing the same thing, you know, have a look at it, figure out what sounds cool to you, then do go and check out the Wowhead garrison calculator. I will again be linking it in the article. So go and you can actually just build a garrison on Wowhead, which will show you all the perks, all the different levels. Basically everything, pretty much everything you need to know about building a garrison, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Blizzard adds something next week, it'll take us a little bit of time to add it. But yeah, I mean, we just had a big update last week with, you know, showing more requirements. So that should get people set that really want to, you know, dig into the details.
Definitely. And so the other interesting thing we heard about in the dev Q&A was a little tiny bit more information on the legendary quest chain. They didn't really give us a huge amount of stuff that we didn't know already. But again, on the basis that not everyone is reading every 100% of our content, we're just going to run through it again. So we know it involves Khadgar. We found some quests which involve reporting to Khadgar.
Yeah, it was the Skyreach quest, and then we found 3 achievements for chapters 1, 2, and 3 talking about dungeons and doing stuff for Khadgar in both High Mall and Blackrock Foundry.
Exactly, yeah. So we've got that there already. We kind of knew about that. We've also previously spoken about the reward being a ring and the subsequent sort of interim rings that will appear between when you first start the quests and when you complete it. It's interesting to note as well that as we had sort of discovered on looking through the data previously, they have now confirmed that you will be able to start progress on your legendary ring at level 98. So to me, that sounds like a fantastic change. I think that's a really, really good thing. It's
yeah, I agree.
Max. So you can
I mean, like, if you're new and you're trying to figure out what you want to do in WoW, you can still get your feet wet just doing dungeons, you know, with friends. And obviously we don't know all the details, but I like how it's giving players an incentive to hit max level and sort of whets their appetite to get cool weapons.
Exactly. Yeah, and it also doesn't feel like, for me at least, when I'm grinding up to max level, particularly in a new expansion where, excuse me, it's harder for me to do it in the way that I prefer, which is mostly by doing dungeons, because there is that pressure to get to max level on your first character fairly quickly. So I sort of feel like when I get to level 100, I'm like, ooh, okay, put my feet up, you know, obviously start doing some arenas, looking for some gear for PvP. I don't want to then feel that I'm actually, although the reality is that I'm actually just at the start of the content. I want to feel like, all right, that's an achievement off my list. I shouldn't be like plowing into this content. So just being able to get the legendary started earlier is psychologically sort of a nice little boost for me, because you're not at the very beginning of this expansion.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would agree too that, you know, they're overwhelmed with all this new information and they've just hit 100 and they feel that they want to feel that something they've been doing along the way has been useful, as opposed to, okay, like, time to replace all the gear I just got after I finally adjusted to no flying and finally figured out these garrison resources. So it's nice to feel like you did something that you're going to hold on to for a while.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good point. So we've spoken a little bit in the past about the ring rewards, and they have some really cool procs, don't they? Primary stats mostly.
Yeah, depending on which version you get, it's either a chance to have a 10% or 15% boost to your primary stat for a, you know, temporary short period. So that's really pretty neat.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so the other thing which we heard about the legendary quest, which people will be very happy to hear, is that it's confirmed that there will be no PvP involved. So I think everyone is just...
Two good things.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. So we've got no PvP, there's going to be no rep grinds either. And I was kind of interested to hear this because, like, to me at least, the rep grind with Black Prince was among the easier tasks that you had to do for the Legendary Cloak quest. To me, the worst part is the RNG, is trying to get the drops, trying to get the sigils, trying to get the rune stones, that sort of thing. And I was interested to note that they were saying it's all coming from a focus now on dungeons and raids. And I was then immediately worried, you know, as we people who pay a lot of attention to video games love to immediately assume the worst. Does that mean, therefore, that there's going to be a ton of RNG drops in there, or is it going to be something else? And obviously we don't know, but...
Yeah, I mean, maybe they have some sort of, I don't know, internal research, because thinking back to that buff we've gotten, the buff was, you know, for reputation. So they must have felt that people in some form were struggling with the reputation if they needed a buff in some way.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I mean, to me it was easy, but I mean, maybe I could see if you are, I don't know, if you're doing it on an alt and it's 5.4 and you're like, okay, I have to go grind up neutral to exalted with this faction. Let me just, you know, sit in this one area and grind something out for... Yeah. Maybe it felt like it was either a blocker when it was new, or sort of trivial and like not really integrated or promoting the gameplay they wanted when it was outdated.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And I think, as you say, they wouldn't have put a buff in if people weren't getting stuck on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible as well that if you weren't someone who pays a ton of attention to gaming websites, that you weren't aware of the very easy ways to grind out that reputation. Like, there were a ton of mobs on the Isle of Thunder that you could just spam grind those and get it done really, really fast. But if the majority of the player base may not have known about that. So perhaps there was a real problem there for some people who, aren't regularly interacting with gaming sites.
And I think they also wanted to change like rep grinds in general in Warlords, so it's not a go kill mobs forever to hit Exalted. They seem to be moving away from that model and wanting you to like do quest or more creative things instead, and not have rep grinds feel mandatory. And I can see how putting a rep grind into a legendary quest line makes it feel really mandatory. So maybe it's a rebranding campaign that rep grinds are for fun vanity items.
That's definitely a very fair point. So I'm hoping, in summary, hoping that there won't be a huge focus on you have to cross your fingers and really hope to get a ton of sigils or iron snacks, like little iron things off of bosses in dungeons and raids. Like, fingers crossed they don't go down that route too hard. I mean, I would love it to see things like, the initial Fangs of the Father quests, or even the Shah of Fear one in
maybe a set amount that you get from each boss. And it takes a while, but it's more of a guaranteed grind as opposed to RNG.
Definitely, like, that you're going to get it. You just, like, to me, it's way better with these sorts of items when you don't have this feeling of, oh, I could get one every single time, but I might not, versus I'd love to be able to say, like, right, I'm going to kill this boss 10 times. Like, by the end of that 10th time, I will do way more of that than I have to collect 10 items from some of these bosses, and they may or may not drop one. If it's a sort of tangible quantity that I can, like, right, I'm going to grind my way through this, I can totally do that. Where it's RNG based, less so. It's not so much fun for me.
Exactly.
For sure. So hopefully they will go down that road instead. So moving into the garrison stuff, we mentioned earlier that there's an absolute metric ton of garrison information that's been in here, and also some other stuff that's been released just today. So they were talking a little bit about garrison invasions, saying that they are fought off by you and your friends, so you can actually have your friends go into your garrison to help you with your garrison invasions. And they have bronze, silver, and gold level rewards, not dissimilar to challenge modes, so that actually bringing your friends along might be a decent idea. So first up, let's just talk briefly about how to get into someone else's garrison, because although they did cover it in the interview, a bunch of commenters on Wowhead and other places seem to have been a little confused about the process.
Too, because invasions and joining other garrisons have seemed kind of buggy on the beta, so I haven't.
Definitely the case. I actually managed to get an invasion to work very, very early on when they shouldn't have really been active, I believe. So it's entirely possible the invasion I had was complete nonsense, but NPCs invaded my garrison. My NPC buddies and I killed them, and they left. So I feel like it was definitely undertuned if they're advising you to bring people into your garrison to help with the invasion. I don't feel like I should have been able to sort of be AFK here fighting, immediately alt-tab back in and be like, oh god, there's NPCs in my garrison, kill them. That shouldn't, it shouldn't be that easy if there are big rewards on them. But the actual simple act of getting into someone else's garrison is as straightforward as being part of a group. So you have to be in a party to actually access other people's garrisons. And Perk and I actually had this come up when we first investigated the group finder back in, I want to say April. Was it April when we first
it was June. We couldn't play in April, but yeah, it was
course,
June.
But yeah, so in June we actually investigated the group finder in game for the first time very early. And as part of that, we noticed that there was a drop down, like right-clicking on the character portrait, that allowed you to go to party leader's garrison. So we couldn't actually get it to work, unfortunately, but it looks like from that, and from subsequent testing has confirmed that you just literally right-click your character portrait, and within that drop-down menu there is an option that is go to party leader's garrison. What I haven't seen, and Perk, I don't know if you've seen this either, is anything to go to someone other than the party leader's garrison. So
I haven't seen that yet. I mean, maybe I'll test it this weekend, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I've been borrowing people's, like, come try this thing with me, but I haven't seen that yet. So it's just a case of promoting someone to leader, which is very, very easy to do, and then you can go into their garrison. That seems to be how it works on the beta right now. Obviously, as we've seen things working on the beta, doesn't mean that that's absolute confirmation that's how they'll work on live. But it's kind of interesting to talk about the group to repel the invasion thing. Like, are you going to need a group to get the best level of stuff? And obviously we can't tell this yet because no one's really been able to test these groups. But to me, it seems kind of tiresome to have to get if you want to be, if it's going to be the case that you actually have to get a group into your garrison to get the top rewards from this. That to me is kind of unfun.
I mean, maybe they'll try to tie it with the idea that if you already have to go do a dungeon with your friends to get the cool items from the inn or run a challenge mode, that, hey, let's just take 5 minutes and, go help out people in your garrison. It's like a little warm up. Maybe almost view it like a scenario, except the scenario is in your garrison, and you're gonna go do something really short with people you know.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it. I like that angle.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be very quick. So again, speaking about garrisons, they also talked about professions, which is something we covered in quite a lot of detail in last week's show. So if you want to learn a lot more about professions, and particularly re-rolling, so the idea of changing professions at max level, do go and watch last week's show. Perk explains in huge detail about how she re-rolled her blacksmithing and how that all worked. So do go and check that out. So they clarified on the dev Q&A some of the differences that buildings make. The example they gave was also blacksmithing. It's a popular example. And they were talking about how if you are a person with the profession blacksmithing who builds a blacksmith, that gives you an additional cooldown every day. So you would then have 2 instead of just 1. And you have access to all of the recipes, including the very, very best recipes, the real top end.
Yeah, I was noticing that when I had a building and I didn't have that profession, I could speak to the NPCs, but it would say, hey, these recipes are only available at level 1, or, these require level 2. And there were some really awesome ones, like, for example, making the leatherworking wolf that I couldn't make just, without the profession.
Yes, that makes sense. So then if you do have the building, but you don't have the profession, you obviously, like Perk just said, you don't have access to the very best recipes, the really cool stuff. And you also only have 1 cooldown a day, so you are only able to make things at a slightly slower rate. So I personally think this is really interesting. I think it's actually really nice, but I do think it slightly takes away from professions, particularly early on in the expansion, where that's the only time where I could ever make money as a blacksmith, was early in the expansion when people really needed me to craft stuff for them. So I'm kind of interested to see this change that's shifting it away from you have to have a friend with this profession to you have to have a building.
Yeah, I mean, if they're talking about the economy with players and like, say you are a blacksmith, it's going to take you, some time to fully level up. It's going to take you some time to, grind out the currency needed for these recipes. So at the very, very start of the expansion, when there's this rush, a blacksmith still has to spend some time to, get up. So it's almost like they'll be equivalent to a random person with a building until they spend a few weeks getting their top level recipes. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, this is all very new stuff, and it's hard to see how economy is going to play out on live servers based on the beta because there's such a limited population. So making assertions about how Perk and I can't say, oh, this is going to have a very negative effect on blacksmiths because, economical stuff only really works in actual practice. So we'll have to see what goes on there, and maybe they'll change it a little bit so that you can't get access to the recipes so quickly with the buildings or something along those lines, just to keep it in line. Or you can make more
stuff if you're a blacksmith. Maybe you get a higher yield on your profession work or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. I feel there's lots that they can do to actually, even out any imbalances caused by the buildings there. So the last thing we really wanted to hit from the dev Q&A, and partly also because we have a post on the official forums that talks about this, was some changes to followers. So game director Tom Chilton, who is, everyone always thought Ghostcrawler was the guy in charge of WoW. Spoilers, it's Tom Chilton. So he's been on the official forums talking about 2 things, one of which was also covered in the dev Q&A. So he mentioned how you now deactivate followers instead of dismissing them, which they did talk about in the dev Q&A. So this allows you to preserve the item level and the gear of a follower that is inactive.
There's no follower cap. There's no where did my follower go to. They all stick around now, and people are happy with that aspect, I think.
Definitely. I think it's a really nice idea, because I could see with the follower cap, although I definitely understood the reasoning of the devs doing it, I could really see how people could feel like, okay, so I've leveled up these followers, and now I have to keep them. I can't dismiss these guys.
Right.
I've got to keep them around. I'm not going to get any new followers now, and that's less fun than trying to sort of tailor-make your group.
That discourages people from exploring and finding more.
Exactly, yeah. And, they've clarified that the way to reactivate them is that you have a small gold cost, I believe Corey said either 100 or 200 gold. He speaks very fast sometimes, rather like me, so it's a little difficult to understand him occasionally. But I think he said like 100 gold, and you can only do one per day, so you can't like revamp your whole follower list every day.
I think that's a good compromise.
I agree, yeah, I think that's a really nice thing. So what Tom posted as well on the official forums is a little bit more controversial, and people seem less positive about this. I'm actually going to read you guys his post so that you actually get the full context here, because otherwise I'd just be rephrasing it. So Tom says, once you have followers at eye level 615, the second tier of level 100 missions unlocks. At 630, the third tier unlocks, which includes missions with eye level 645 gear for your character. And when you have followers at eye level 645, the fourth tier unlocks. He then goes on to add, the fourth tier is special in that they show up rarely, but they're raid missions for your followers that reward your character with raid quality loot of a tier higher than you're currently running. He clarifies that terminology of tier by saying if you're doing LFR, you'll get normal quality raid loot. If you're running normal raids, you'll get heroic quality loot, and heroic raiders will get mythic quality loot. Mythic raiders will get mythic loot and 1,000 gold. These missions show up rarely enough, he adds, that you won't be able to deck out your character in these items before the next raid zone shows up, but having a handful of them will give you a nice edge. Now, Perk, obviously it's no great surprise that people are not too super happy about this.
I mean, I have a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, how long does it take to level and gear up a follower? You know, you have to think 90 to 100 and then boosting their eye level up, you know, as well. So is that going to take a while? Is that going to take weeks or months? Is cutting edge progression going to be over by the time your follower has a chance to even get this mission? And then it's also how rare, you know, are the missions? They did say that if you had this, it would give you a nice edge, but you know that's not really hard facts. Like, is this going to? I mean, there are definitely rare missions that I have not seen in like since I've been able to have my pre-made level 100 with the wipes. Like, I've been always trying to get this rare Hearthstone mission and like the Dance Studio mission just to see them, and I haven't ever seen them on any of my characters. So that seems pretty rare.
Yeah.
And, you know, is it worth pouring all this energy into leveling up followers and doing missions daily if you're like never going to even see these? And then my final question is, how does it determine what tier you are running? Like, you know, could people sell like mythic lockouts to other people? Like, oh, I usually do LFR, but let me just hop in and get, you know, I don't know, get saved to something. I don't know. It just seems that there's a lot of questions. And my personal opinion is that this maybe isn't the worst thing, because we have gear on the black market auction house already. There is some confusion around 300 stat food. And yes, while it's good if you're in like a bleeding edge guild, you didn't totally need it at the start of Mists of Pandaria if you were, you know, raiding more casually or, you know, had limited amount of time. There were faster ways to sort of get more bang for your buck if you were short on time and wanted to, you know, improve your character in some form. But I get how, you know, the eye level and like the gear and the consumable is something like tangible to, you know, hold on to and fixate onto, as opposed to I'm going to die in fire and I'm, you know, not doing well at my proving grounds. But I think that because we haven't seen a lot of blue post from the developers, that having this post just sort of by itself can make people alarmed. It didn't give a lot of details, and garrisons have not been documented super well on the official forums, and now we get this post talking about how, hey, you know, you can get mythic epics from your garrison. Like, it's a very, I can see all these factors sort of snowballing into something that maybe is making them seem worse than they are, especially because we haven't been able to test this a lot on the beta, and I don't even think that these raid missions are available yet, even.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I haven't seen any evidence of these missions, despite having followers at relatively decent item levels. And I think that everything Perk said is a really, really good point. I can totally understand why people are freaking out over this. I could totally understand that if you go and read, oh, there are missions I can do with my followers once I get them to this point, which is definitely higher the follower progression, that give me mythic raid loot plus gear. And like that in isolation, which is how it's being presented, is scary to people who don't want to feel like they have to really be focused on the garrison, who don't want to feel like the garrison is a mandatory, that word that people love to say, part of the game. So I definitely think that they need to clarify. And honestly, just go back and listen to what Perk just said, Blizzard, and just run through those questions and clarify them. And I definitely agree that I'm really interested to see how they're going to actually define, like, do you have to have killed one boss on heroic difficulty ever to then be counted for the rest of that raid tier as someone who's getting mythic loot plus, you know, 1,000 gold every time one of these admittedly very rare missions pops up? Or do you actually have to have completed a raid? I'm really curious to see that. And I think that this is a weird out of nowhere. Like, we knew that there was gear that your followers could achieve that was going to be available for your character. But this sort of level of gear is kind of news to people. Like, I think everyone had assumed it would be like, I don't know, LFR. Yeah. Like
I think they just need some like concrete examples, like, hey, in a month maybe you'll see like one piece of gear. Yeah. And I think they could also emphasize other things like, hey, you know, you can do like Astron or Proving Grounds or challenge modes for skill or Brawler's Guild. Like, I just feel that with not much communication, people are going to say, oh my god, gear, like I can get gear and this will make me better, or the boss will die slightly faster, instead of thinking of the less obvious ways, or, you know, other ways to get better that have more personal responsibility.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's also worth remembering that they've been very clear about how the raid level missions and even the dungeon level missions aren't at the 30-minute intervals that the early garrison missions are. So it's not
they're super long.
Yeah, they're super long, exactly. So it's not like someone who's in Method is going to be able to spam grind their followers up to eye level, whatever it was, 6.
And level 100, because, you know, you start with this level 90 character, and if they have the wrong traits, they could die on the mission, and then you can't even use them for the...
You don't get anything, and then you've got to wait another week before you can even send them on that mission. So I don't think that this is going to mean that people who are in the Methods and the Blood Legions and the Envies and the Midwinters and the Exorcists of this world are going to have to grind out level 100 and high eye-level followers. Sorry?
I mean, if they even, like, you know, hey, look, he's 100 and we already killed the boss.
Yeah, it's literally impossible to do. So I don't see that being a real thing for the World First race. I mean, obviously, you know, those guys are very much edge cases, and my concern is always more for the people who are more in line with my level of rating, where they're not in the level 100.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the messaging. Like, I don't want people to think that this is mandatory and, you know, now they're locked into doing this garrison stuff every day, and it's a daily, and, you know, their raid's going to kick them if they don't have
definitely. And I think that that's always like Perk and I have discussed this on several occasions in the past, that in itself is a mentality problem. Like, if you are in a guild whose raid spot mentality does not tie up with the amount of work you want to do to get into raids, then maybe consider either talking to your guild or looking for a different guild. You know, if you're feeling like you're doing way more work than they're asking for, or way less than they're asking for, you want to do way less than they're asking for, maybe you've just got a clash of mentalities there. But I do think that there is, you know, I understand why people are scared. Blizzard, go back, listen to all those things Perk asked, and fill us in on the actual real facts about this. So, moving on from the dev Q&A and from Tom Chilton's controversial posts on the forums, part of what we do every week in this show is talk about what's new on Wowhead itself. So, as ever, we have the beta key giveaway going on. This week we are talking about 6.0 preparation after Perk put together an awesome guide about everything you should be doing to get ready for 6.0, which we covered in huge detail at the end of last week's episode. So if you want to find out more about the stuff that you should be doing before 6.0, and obviously it's not mandatory rating things, don't worry guys, but there's about a bunch of information in there about things that are going away in 6.0, which you wouldn't necessarily want to miss out on. So do go check that out. So this week's competition for beta keys is asking people to go and do one of the dungeons that's being revamped in 6.0, which is Razorfen Crow, Razorfen Downs, Black Fathom Depths, and Ubers, right? Did I miss one?
Yep, those are the four.
I've been misremembering them every single time, so hooray for me. So one of those four, and that will allow you to enter. As ever, if you have verified already and completed these achievements already, you can just go ahead and enter, you're all good. So we are still having some problems, aren't we, with the OAuth and the Armory and
I know, everything on Blizzard is just, I think they're preparing for 6.0, but yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah, it's frustrating, particularly, you know, we put a bunch of work into getting this stuff working, so it's frustrating when it then just doesn't work. And we want to give you stuff, you know, we want to give you nice things, including beta keys. So this week we are going to do roughly the same thing, not exactly the same thing, but roughly the same thing as we did last week. So again, we're going to give out another 100 beta keys. So hooray for beta keys. We're going to draw this on Tuesday. So you've got the whole weekend to comment. And we are going to be asking you a little bit more specific this time. So last time we asked you to do something interesting.
You had so many nice replies.
We had so many. It was lovely. It was actually a really lovely thing to read through all your replies. So thank you so much. People wrote poems, people told us stories, people did all sorts of things. And it was really, really fun and encouraging. And it just helps Perk and I feel motivated to carry on making all this content. So thank you very much indeed for all of those lovely remarks. So what we're asking you to do this week is we're getting a little bit more specific. We're asking you to tell us which of our Warlords of Draenor guides you like the best. Now, it doesn't have to be about content that you do. It could just be one with awesome pictures. It could be one that, you know, there's a little pet in that you really love. But go through the guides, or, you know, if you have a guide that you've already been spending a ton of time looking at, check them out and have a look at the guides. Let us know which one is your favorite. If you don't mention your favorite guide in the comments, I'm afraid we're not going to be picking you. So do make sure you do that. It's a stipulation, not a request. And we are going to link, obviously, in the article to all of our Warlords of Draenor guides, not individually because there's too many of them. We're going to link you to the landing page of the Warlords of Draenor guides. So check them out. Tell us which one you like the best. So quite apart from all of this, oh, and sorry, one more thing to mention that's really important. Don't comment on the video. A bunch of you guys commented on the video, which was lovely and still fabulous to read the comments, but you have to comment on the post on Wowhead rather than on the video itself. So that was the final thing about beta key giveaways. The other thing we do is talk about all of the stuff that Perk and the dev team are doing behind the scenes, which you might not necessarily know about. So what have you been working on this week? A ton of stuff with heirlooms, right?
Yeah, so basically, heirlooms, along with every other type of item in Warlords, had to be refactors, which meant that previously, if you visited the Warlords version of an item page, it did not have stat scaling for heirlooms, and it was blank, and the Garrosh heirlooms were stuck at 90 and not very helpful. So we put a lot of work into making sure that all of the heirlooms are now scaling once again with the post-squish values. So, you know, heirlooms are going to be you know, all the stats are going to be decreased, but they also get scaled correctly. And the Garrosh heirlooms now scale from 90 to 100, and you can see what their, you know, level is at each point, and, you know, see that the normal, heroic, and mythic versions of the Garrosh heirlooms all converge to be eye level 633 at 100. Oh. So that's pretty useful. And yeah, I mean, you know, it works in tooltips. You can move the slider back and forth. Works in the item comparison tool. You can link like a specific level version of it. So we're really happy to get that done, you know, because that change is coming in 6.0, not Warlords of Draenor. That's pretty cool. That's one of the big item things we did. And another item thing we did is that we talk a lot about these bonuses, and we want people to get more familiar with the term and sort of how items are changing. So on our Warlords site, if you're searching for items, we've taken away the upgrade column because that's not really useful when Warlords hits. Items, you know, new items can't get upgraded. And we replaced it with a bonus column, which shows all the other versions that item can be. So, you know, if you're looking at, if you were like, I want to see all heroic items, this column will be like, hey, there's actually this version that's eye level 615 at level 97, and there's this version at level 90, and there's a version at level 92. So, yeah, I mean, so it helps you realize all the different versions, which I think that all the item changes are really confusing, and this makes it a lot better. And it's really cool because you have all the icons and you just mouse over and it shows all the different versions. You can click on them and go to that specific version of the item. So that is also cool. And the final thing we did is we did spells for a change, also confusing because it's on Draenor perks. Perks is a very odd word this week. And because some spells are getting really changed with the addition of Draenor perks, we wanted them to be permanently included on the tooltip. We like to keep our tooltips usually simple for the most part, and we don't include every modification in them, but we thought that it was really important to see like the level 90 version of an ability and then the version with the Draenor perk, you know, if it hits like 20% harder or there's like the target cap is removed. So at the bottom of Warlords tooltips, it just says, you know, hey, this is the Draenor perk, you get it to level 92 plus, and this is what it does. So we think that would be really useful, especially when, you know, doing things like 6.0 guides or, you know, theory crafting and Warlords. And this way, if you're new to WoW, the tooltips are useful, and if you are level 100, they're still useful as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really, really good change having the Draenor perks in there, particularly where they're modifying specific abilities. It's really nice to see that in the tooltip so that you can mouse over it. And if you're embedding tooltips on Wowhead tooltips on a different site, that's also going to work as well with the Warlords ones. So
Yeah, definitely.
once they come,
It's the Warlords version, and then of course all that switches over to live when 6.0 hits.
Exactly, yeah. So that's great stuff. So that's the end of all the Wowhead stuff this week. We're going to go back now to the beta build. I feel like that was ages ago.
And it was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday. It was 3 days ago. This is ridiculous. It's been a long old week. So we had a bunch of really exciting stuff come in there. And actually, Perk is only now been interviewed today by the Washington Post about something that we found, which was Perk and a user on Wowhead tracked down the actual Robin Williams NPC on a little island, right? Tell us exactly where it is.
Yeah, so you can access it from getting off the coast of Talador in the southwest. And it's really good to have a mount with water walking because you do have to, cross a while to this island which has Nagrand-style trees. So you'll pass an island that has a murloc on it, keep going past that, and then you'll find this little island that has these trees and all sorts of items that are themed after his films. Like you have this egg that's cracked that looks like the tribute to Mork. You have these mechanical toys, tribute to toys, and then you have this genie with an ever-burning lamp that you can rub to actually summon Robin Williams as a genie. And he says slightly modified versions of his famous Aladdin quotes. I think there's like a copyright issue with Disney, but you can summon him, he grows and, says his cosmic power line, and then he shrinks and waves goodbye. And, you can just perpetually summon him. And I think even more might be coming because we data mined the 2 other versions of his NPC. And with all the items scattered about on his island, maybe there'll be this option to, I don't know, summon different versions of him on different days or like server restarts. That would be pretty cool, because the egg seems pretty big just to have nothing there. And we do have this, NPC with overalls that fits the character theme.
Yeah, definitely. Or maybe the genie will be able to transform into things or something along those lines. Like I'd love the genie to be able to do wishes in some way so that you could have wishes from the genie for like quests or something along that. That would probably be getting a little bit carried away, but it would be really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, they have a comedian title, and I wonder if it's tied to it. Maybe I don't know, see all versions of Robin Williams and get the comedian.
That would be a cool thing to do. I like that idea. Or maybe he can give you stuff to do or something along those lines. That would be really, really fun. So you just have to randomly go there at certain times of day or year or whatever to see the different versions. That's really cool. So there was nothing more on that island than really just the NPCs and the animations, or was there other stuff hanging out there as well?
No, I mean, that was pretty much just it. I think it's nice how you can just sort of pay tribute to him and not have to worry about, people like crafting or checking the mail or spamming trade chat, like mounting up next to you. It's like an island that's really dedicated to him, which I think is really
That's really sweet. That's a lovely thing. So we found a bunch of other cool vanity stuff in the recent build. There was an update to the Harvest Festival that was actually not in the newest build, but was in the previous build on beta. It's just the Harvest Festival hadn't started yet, excuse me.
Yeah.
So the quest to honor a hero added, which is the one where you go and you fly and you find either Grom's monument or Arthas's. Uther's.
No.
Arthas. I'm getting mixed up. I'm not good at the lore side of stuff. But yeah, Uther's monument.
The good captain.
Yeah, that good guy. Not that guy who became the Lich King. They don't have a monument for him. Not that surprising, I suppose. But yeah, so it's basically you just go and put a little thing there and it builds up all these candles and stuff and it looks kind of cool. And that quest has some 4 additional rewards added, which are these items that in the inventory and in the quest text itself kind of look like gems, but they're not. They're an item that goes into your bag, stack of 3, and using the item by right-clicking it gives you a buff which is in accordance with the item. And so there is red, purple, green, and yellow. And they all give you a different buff.
Sort of bluish yellow, I think.
Yeah, it's a blue. It's definitely not a sort of... Oh, sorry, no, you're right. It's blue, not yellow. But they give you a sort of different buff on each one. The buffs aren't important because all they do is make your character kind of ghostly and glowy and cool looking.
Yeah, that's a really cool tint.
Yeah,
so
it's a really
purely
nice
vanity.
tint.
But like the Harvest Festival never has anything, so it's really cool that it has something now.
It finally has something. And it doesn't. They don't say on the right now that they require the Harvest Festival, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think
You
so. So it's
can go
pretty
and
cool.
use keep using them all year round. So that's pretty fun. Obviously, there's only three, so you'll have to be very, very, very sort of economical with them if you want to keep
Yeah.
using them. But yeah, they're a fun addition thing. We also found a new in-game store pet, right? That was marked in-game store in the
Yeah.
data.
Yeah, it's this super cute Caribor kid. It's a
Really adorable.
neon blue goat. So
Yeah.
it's not up for sale on the in-game store yet on the beta, but like periodically they add sources to the data and the journal, and we data mine them. We're like, oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So we can see, like, just for clarity, we can see on the data that there is actually the source is noted as the in-game store. We're not just asserting that based on some figment of our imagination. So the other really big thing that was in the most recent build was the loot for all bosses was added into the dungeon journal. And that actually, there's a couple of bits and bobs, even in-game, in the dungeon section, but the raid one is fully fleshed out now, I think, right?
Yeah, we have all the raid information. The dungeon ones we'll probably see next build, but yeah, we have raid information for both High Mall and Blackrock Foundry.
Yeah, so that's great. So that allows us to see the sort of where everything's coming from, and more importantly and more interestingly, to me at least, the item levels themselves. So obviously do bear in mind that these are subject to change. They're in at the moment, but that doesn't mean they can't tweak the item levels up and down. I mean, we have seen, like in the Mist of Pandaria, we saw a change to the item level of honor items where they were taken from down to 458 from 465. Even after
Yeah, it's
the
really
game had
easy
launched.
for Blizzard to just change the item level in something altogether.
Exactly. So don't assume that these are completely final item levels. But as it stands right now, from a normal dungeon at 97, you're getting item level 615 gear. From a heroic dungeon, 630. LFR is 640. Normal, which used to be called Flex, is 655. Heroic, which used to be called Normal, is 670. And Mythic, which used to be Heroic, is 685.
For High Mall.
For High Mall.
Which is the first raid, which you
Yeah.
can do a few weeks after launch.
Exactly. So then for the next one along, I think was it 690 for the next one along?
Yeah, they just bumped everything up 10 item levels.
Oh,
from
sorry, so 695 then, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, LFR for Blackrock Foundry starts off at 650, but as we've already heard, it's going to take, of weeks, maybe even a few months to have that be opened up. So it's not going to be like, oh, like forget High Mall, I'll just wait for Blackrock Foundry.
LFR.
You're going to have months of just being in High Mall.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely that to consider. But yeah, it was interesting. Like these item levels are slightly surprising to me because I thought that we were going for, like they said previously, that they're going for a sort of tourist mode.
Yeah, I thought heroic dungeons were meant to be almost equivalent to LFR.
Yeah, that was the impression I got too.
640 seems clearly better.
Yes, I mean, like I'm not that good at maths, as we discovered in last week's episode, where I failed at subtracting 6 from 7. But that aside, even I can tell that 630 and 640, there's a pretty substantial difference there between those item levels. And I was definitely of the impression that we were going to be having heroic dungeon stuff at the same level, or like either the same level or very, very similar level to LFR. So that's it was surprising to me. And I suppose the other thing which they can do, and they've talked about doing this as well, is dramatically increasing the drop rates in LFR. So even if you do sort of feel like you have to do it to get that eye level 640 gear, you only have to do it like once. Like if they had the drop rate at like 50% or something crazy like that, so there's a 50% chance that you're gonna get an item off every single boss, and that would improve it somewhat. But I'm slightly sort of surprised because people are still going to feel like they have to do LFR if this is the case, and if these item levels go in.
Especially if heroic dungeons maybe don't drop what you need, but has this really high drop chance and the loot is better as well.
Exactly, and I feel like they're sort of like this. The thing they talked about of massively buffing the drop rate in LFR is. It just means that people are going to feel like, all right, I'm level 90 now. I have to get the item level to go into LFR, and then I have to spam run LFR like only a few times, but you're going to feel like it's the best way to gear.
Yeah.
If that drop rate's really high and the item level is clearly superior. It's sort of, I'm kind of surprised by the item levels as they stand right now at least. And obviously, as we said, these are subject to change. And I mean, like, as well, it's
also it's not that much lower from normal as well.
Yeah.
It's like 630 is heroic dungeon, 640 is LFR, and then 655 is the normal high mall. So, I mean, LFR gear is worse because you don't know the set bonuses and the trinkets aren't as awesome, but it still feels like that. I don't know. It seems kind of close. Like if if you're coming back to WoW, you'd probably be like, oh, LFR is the same as usual. It's,
Yeah.
higher than heroic dungeons and kind of close to normal loot. I don't know if it comes across that it's meant to be sort of tourist mode or not as
Yeah,
awesome.
indeed. And like there's definitely like the big gap between someone who is wearing pieces at 630 and then 655. Like that's a substantial upgrade as well.
Yeah.
And I got like if we correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we'd heard that challenge mode on the quests they had a chance to award LFR gear.
Yeah, I believe they're meant to reward some sort of higher quality gear.
Yes,
Um, we know that it's not from bosses. There was an error where there was like a challenge mode table
that's
added to
right.
the dungeon journal at one point, and
Yeah.
that was a mistake. But yeah, it's meant to be an incentive where in Mists of Pandaria you got valor points for doing challenge modes, and since valor points are going away, they want to have they'll just give you a piece of gear instead.
Yeah, like I would kind of hope that to be sort of better than the LFR gear because it's a challenge mode is one of the many really hard things to do in the game until obviously people figure out all the tips and tricks. But they're
Yeah.
certainly tricky when they're new, and I would like to see that.
Yeah, we've gone over how the LFR gear doesn't like look as awesome,
Yeah.
and like I said, you can get like a chest from LFR, but it won't be part of a tier set. You're not going to activate a 2-piece bonus with that LFR chest.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know, there's kind of these item levels are slightly surprising to me at least, and I'd be interested to see if we have any changes coming into those or whether they actually go live with it like this. LFR just feels out of place if they're genuinely doing this tourist mode, and I think part of the problem which people had with LFR as much as anything is that you're running the same raid 4 times. If you're doing those LFR normal, heroic, and mythic difficulties, you're running that same raid 4 different times, and that just results in people getting burnt out. So it'll be really interesting to see those. We also found out about the tier tokens. So Kromog has helms, Foreman Feldspar has legs, Operator Thorgar has shoulders, Flamebender Kagraz has a chest, and Iron Maidens have the gloves. But Black Hand drops something interesting, doesn't he? There's the garage tokens.
Yeah, it's something similar. They have really similar names, and it seems that you can get pretty much any sort of raid token but from getting it from Blackhand. And it's also good to mention that the tier drops are only available in Blackrock Foundry, so you cannot get tier gear from Heimal.
Oh, that's interesting to note. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's like Mokusan didn't drop the tier stuff, and then Heart of Fear did. The difference is that there's more of a gap between the first tier 17 raid and then the second one, then tier 14.
Definitely. No, that is really interesting. So, bunch of information about raid gear there. There is a huge post on Wowhead which details it all with the dungeon journal. So if you're interested in digging a little bit deeper into this, again, link in the article on Wowhead that accompanies this video. So you can check all of that out and look at the numbers, look at the stats if you want to, see how those are increasing and decreasing with item levels, and obviously go through the items, check out the different bonus levels, that sort of thing. So a ton of information there. Other cool things from the beta though, Brawlers Guild. A lot of people have been asking what's happening to Brawlers Guild, this sort of little used but well loved part of Mr. Pandaria, and it is being rescaled to level 100, right? And explain exactly how it's working with these seasons.
So basically, if you've killed everything already, you get a feat of strength. Your achievement becomes a feat of strength called Season 1. So, like rank 8, getting all the getting all the challenge cards and killing all of those bosses, like that's now Season 1. And even if you've gotten everything, you've got like max level grinding, when you hit 100, your rep is reset. Like it's a new season. So if you want the fresh achievements and not a feat of strength, you have to go back and kill all the bosses now scaled for level 100 in order to regain all those achievements. You keep all of your rewards though, and currently there isn't really much of a reason to go back and do it again, as opposed to saying, oh, I want my 10 points in addition to my feat of strength. The one thing I noticed is that the teleport ring is now the new version is now eye level 630, and the stats work for all specs. It's a ring that, switches between agi, intellect, or strength. So, I guess you might want to get that ring now, and you do have to grind up to, I think, rank 4 to purchase it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it all seemed pretty much the same. Achievements that aren't really tied to killing anything, like taking the portal or like throwing fruit or something, they just stay put. There's no Season 1 or new one. It's just, whatever you did something in the Brawlers Guild, that's it. You don't have to do anything. It doesn't go away. It doesn't change. But yeah, I mean, we have guides to that, as we've covered in our Preparing for 6.0 guide. And yeah, at this point, maybe they'll add more items, but at this point, it just is more if you want your 10 points back, go do Brawler skills again.
Yeah, exactly. I can't help thinking that they are likely to add in more items, or at least maybe they'll add some additional bosses after rank 8.
Yeah, I can see that happening, maybe in like a 6.1.
Yeah, 6.1, 6.2 even. Like just an impetus for people to go back up through those. I mean, I personally love Brawler Guild. I find it really fun.
Yeah, I like doing them too.
Yeah, it's just like a nice way to sort of like test out stuff and learn new specs and like learn decent sort of abilities and skills, and particularly positional awareness. I find them really fun for that. Like fights like Hexos, where you've really got to be on the ball to beat them. They're really fun to me. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. So I would definitely go do them anyhow, even if they didn't add more rewards, because I just enjoy the fun of it. But wouldn't be surprised at all to see them adding new stuff. Like this is a very early part of the Brawlers Guild change for Warlords of Draenor. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more coming in. We've also had some interesting information about the removal of Valor and Justice Points from all content. So we've covered this several times in the past. We've mentioned it just now, and we've spoken about this when we talked about Apexis crystals in show number 6, I think. We mentioned this briefly last week again, and we've now got a little bit more information on it, so we're going to keep providing that to you. So Russ Peterson, who is Night Moogle on Twitter and is a reward systems designer for World of Warcraft, has been tweeting with the most recent build about how the JP vendors now, instead of charging justice points and a token for some of the older gear, they now just charge justice points and gold. So justice points are basically
just gold in the token, not just.
Oh, I'm sorry, the other way around. Yeah, gold in the token, not justice points and gold. So justice points are basically being replaced by gold for almost everything, right? So
yeah, even like Valor points for old. I don't know. Yeah, just like pretty much everything that's Valor points that becomes Justice points is now gold. There was a mistake where he said that the build went out before he finished assigning cost to everything. Right. So if you see something for free on the beta, that probably is wrong. But a lot of things cost gold. Most heirlooms cost 400 gold now. I don't know if they'll change that after he finishes his work, but you know that it's sort of interesting just to see that things cost gold now, and maybe you should just wait and wait to buy those heirlooms as opposed to thinking I have to go spend my Dark Moon Fair tickets or like my Argent Champion seals on heirlooms, because gold just seems a lot more simple and straightforward.
Definitely, and that applies to the older set pieces as well, where you were able to go back to certain vendors and buy like set pieces for a certain amount of justice points, where you the older gear for example from Cataclysm, which you could still buy in store.
Yeah, like for example, I got really sick of my level 100 pre-made gear, so I just bought all the Firelands gear that was on the old Justice Point vendor just for gold and logged into that.
That's a great idea. So yeah, it's if you are someone who really is having fun grinding out Justice Points and wants to get the heirlooms, then do it before 6.0. If you're someone who doesn't like grinding out Justice Points, you just want to pay gold, then wait.
Yeah.
And 400, if that stays the same, and obviously there's no guarantee that it will, but if that does stay the same, that's very reasonably priced given the cost of the ones on the guild vendors being between 1200 and 1750.
I mean, we'll see. We'll definitely keep an eye out for the next build, see if things are fixed, and also, go check the guild vendors as well.
Yeah, exactly. And finally this week, talking about points, oh, sorry, my phone just went off there, and I thought I had that silenced. We've heard about a change to the upgrades in 6.0. So we covered this on Wowhead this week, and they are now going to be done with lesser charms. So I find this really interesting. Like, why not? Like, I suppose I can see why they don't want to just remove them, because people are going to want to upgrade their gear all ready for leveling and get that all done. But now it's so contrived, the removal of Valor. They're replacing Valor with Apexis crystals. They're replacing Valor with lesser charms. Like, you either need to grind out some lesser charms, or you're going to need to upgrade your stuff with Valor before it goes away. We don't know I believe the number is like a very, very low number of lesser charms. So people who've got 3,000 lesser charms and probably also have all their gear upgraded, you're not going to be able to spend many lesser charms on this stuff.
I mean, I guess in the 6.0 post 6.0 rush, because there's no cap on getting lesser charms, and you could just upgrade all of your remaining gear at once, be set for leveling in Draenor. But yeah, it's obviously not going to be that much useful once the expansion hits. And to clarify, upgrades with lesser charms only work on the Mist of Pandaria gear, not on any epic added in Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to hold on, like, don't stockpile all your lesser charms and go buy millions and millions of gear things, because they like we've only seen the bonus rolls coming from the Apexis Crystal vendor for different types of resources so far.
Right.
So there's no indication that you're going to have to be grinding out lesser charms in Warlords of Draenor, or even an equivalent currency for that one quest. So yeah, spend them on upgrades, spend them now, do it. Okay, so every week we answer a few questions off Twitter and from email. So if you have questions to send us, use the hashtag W for Wow, H for Head Weekly, WH Weekly, to send us your questions. You can send them all through the week. We'll remind you about them every Friday with a tweet from Wowhead and from Perk and myself. But do send us your questions all through the week. And if you want to email, if you've got a slightly longer question, you can send that to me on Olivia, Olivia, at zamformother.com. So first up this week, this is obviously a question that has come in as a reaction to the Garrison news. So Methylene, who is at Methylene Gaming, asks, Garrisons being, and I'm doing the bunny ears for mandatory, should I be scared, or is this game becoming more and more not for me? So first up, we've obviously already spoken at enormous length about how we don't necessarily feel that the raid thing makes garrisons mandatory. I think that garrisons, personally for me, are one of those types of content that is a huge risk of feeling mandatory, but are actually relatively optional. My personal garrison concern relates more to how much of the game is flowing through garrisons. Like, to me, garrisons feel like the center of the game in Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah, I feel that it's almost like if you're building like a site or like a UI, like the garrisons is sort of like the default thing that you see. And it's like it's like, oh, click here for the alternate view or different options. And I feel, but most users, if they see something, they're like, oh, this is the default thing in front of me.
Yeah.
This is the focus of this feature. While there's tons of rare spawns. Ashran is really huge. There's all sorts of other things you can do. They talked in the interview about these like story quests out there in the world. Obviously raiding, there's dungeons, challenge modes. But I feel that, definitely if when you start questing, you're going to hit the garrison and you have a special, Hearthstone to your garrison, it can feel that that is sort of the obvious thing in front of you to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think that there is, like, I can completely understand why people feel that way. Like, I sort of look at the garrisons and, there's so much information being put out about them because people just don't quite understand what they are or what they're about. And the devs want you to understand this feature that they've obviously, very obviously, put just a huge amount of time into. Like, there's clearly a ton of work gone into these. And people really, really want to, want to be able to get into them and use them and exploit this huge feature that's a huge part of the game. But I think it's very fair to say that they should just be looked at as additional gameplay rather than mandatory. Yeah,
I mean, every other part of the game is being updated. Like there's new, pet battles, for example. There's, you can buy the recipes in Ashran for your profession. Ashran, the capital city, not Ashran, the PvP area. Yeah. Like PvP is not tied there. There's still raids. There's lots of other things. It just is that the garrison is it just sort of, it's a new type of thing that they're trying to sort of integrate and put more in your face.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I sort of like, I don't know how much I'm going to do with garrison. Like, they don't particularly appeal to me. If I had been given a little house in Stormwind, I'd be all over that. Like one little cottage.
Yeah, I'm more about the whole like personal housing angle as opposed to the I have an army.
Yeah, I have an army in this huge like village, and I've got all this stuff to do. I just want somewhere to put my things. I just want to have void storage.
I've definitely been able to do a lot of beta coverage that's unrelated to the garrison.
Yeah.
Like reputations, for example. They're really fun and they don't really tie into my garrison at all.
Exactly. And like raiding, although obviously there is inevitably going to be the argument that this one ability to get raiding gear makes it mandatory, there's still raiding, there's still dungeons, there's still like all of the little dynamic events. There's so much exploration stuff to do. There's millions of treasure chests. There's so much else than the garrison. But I can completely understand Methylene's point of sort of saying, I don't really like this idea, and all I'm hearing about in the Blizzard end of Warlords is garrisons. Like garrison this, garrison that, garrison the other, which makes it feel like there's more focus on that is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's certainly something to keep an eye on, but I don't think you should worry that the game is becoming more and more not for you. So the next question up we had from Dowland Lee. Should there be changes to group or raid drops? Will leather still drop with no leather classes in group or raid? Now, I guess this is a question about, like, you know, the nature of drops in Warlords of Draenor. And we've seen that they are giving people the option to choose between group loot or personal loot. And it sort of was an interesting side to me when this was first announced, because, you know, there's a really good argument for sticking with personal loot or sticking with group loot the whole time. So just for clarity, personal loot is kind of like LFR, where, you know, you're only going to get stuff that is your loot spec. Like, you're not going to go into LFR as a healing paladin and accidentally end up with an agility leather belt, like, or agility leather chest, excuse me. So, you know, that's something that is personalized, hence the term personal loot. And there's also the option to have group loot. And I can imagine that people who are in guilds which are sort of guild-wide progression focused, like they have a raid team and it's these guys are going to go down the group loot route, where they're going to be like, right, now we're going to hand this out and we're going to make sure that everyone gets stuff and it's good stuff for them. Whereas people who are more sort of pugging and, you know, using the group finder to do normal raiding are going to be going more down the the personal loot side of things, so that you don't have master looter problems, you don't have struggles with issues like that, and you are guaranteed then to not have leather dropping with no leather classes to use it.
Another interesting thing is that they changed how primary stats work in Warlords of Draenor. So if you have a leather agi chest, it's not simply a leather agi chest. If there is a druid and it's a restoration druid, that will appear as a leather intellect chest to them. So, you know, while it's not, oh, if there's no male users, no male will drop, it's not, oh, this agi chest dropped and we don't have rogues, so we're out of luck. You know, healers, the stats shift between agi and intellect, or, you know, like strength and intellect, you know, for plate users. So more of it will get used. There's not going to be, oh no, we got like the intellect plate and we don't have the paladin healer. It's like, oh, well, this becomes a strength item for all the, you know, warriors in the raid.
Yeah, definitely. So that's definitely worth considering as well. I don't think necessarily that there should really be further changes than that. I can see the scope for additional changes to allow different types of looting systems, but I feel like these ones are fine for now at least.
Yeah,
I personally don't see the need for more.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, that is all from us this week. We're trying to keep to get this show under an hour, and we keep failing. So next week we're going to be like a 59-minute and 59-second show.
Yes.
So that is all from us this week. You can follow me on Twitter on Olivia D Grace. You can follow Perk on Twitter on Perculia. It's above and below our screens as always. You can follow Wowhead on Wowhead, and you can find information on everything we've spoken about this week, as well as everything else. Warlords of Draenor, Beta, Live, 6.0, you name it. It's all on wowhead.com, so do go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.